Hello, 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 hello. Hi, hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
Welcome everyone to Thursday Night Live.
The live streaming series from the Mackenzie Art Gallery. So I'm Kat Glimke,
I'm Jonathan Garrell.
and we're digital programs coordinators at the gallery.
It's true.
So Thursday nights at 7 p.m. roughly in Central Time, we partner with artists, curators, and educators to deliver workshops, panels, or screenings that reflect on how to view, how to make, and how to enjoy digital art. You, as the audience, play a key role in how this happens. During today's episode, you'll be able to ask questions by typing in the chat box. The chat is located on the right-hand side of this video window if you are watching this on a computer, or underneath the video for those who are watching on a tablet or mobile device. The chat is an important feature of any live stream because this is where the audience can join in. So during the stream, we're encouraging you to ask questions at any time in the chat, whether you are watching on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitch. If you can't seem to be able to access the chat, make sure you are logged into your account on the platform that you're using to view the stream. So ask questions anytime. You can also use the chat to talk to other audience members. But as always, there is another person at the end of this username, so please be respectful.
We had a couple of weeks off for summer vacation from Thursday Night Live, but before that we had been coming off quite a number of weeks of really interesting conversations with artists who use video games as part of their practice. And tonight we sort of take a step back to have a bird's eye view of video games as an art medium with Pippin Barr, who's we are super excited to have on with us tonight. And Pippin has been exploring the formal possibilities of video games as an art medium through the games that he makes, as well as his scholarship as a professor at Concordia University. And as always, our conversations about art and technology can only occur because of the land that facilitates every part of our lives. We'd like to begin by acknowledging that the land we are gathered on for this live stream, Treaty 4 territory, is the homeland of the Cree, the Saulteaux, the Lakota, the Nakota, the Dakota, and the Métis people. You are gathered where you are. And just another note, we've just started the Digital Artist in Residency program at the Mackenzie, and we have a number of our residents joining us on the live stream. So if you hear some more questions, that's who that's coming from, and we're super excited to have all our participants on with us. And so, yes, like I said, we're really excited to have you on, Tim, and thank you so much for joining us. And could we ask you to tell the audience a bit more about yourself and your practice in general?
Sure, that's a big question. Thanks for having me. This is pretty exciting. My name is Pippin Barr. I am an assistant professor at the moment at Concordia University in Montreal. Actually applying for tenure this year, so maybe if I make it through that gauntlet, I'll be an associate professor, which would be wonderful. The main thing that I do at Concordia, the main thing that my research profile concerns is all about making experimental video games. So the department that I'm in is the Department of Design and Computation Arts, and it's actually housed in the Faculty of Fine Arts at the university. So although my PhD is in computer science, I managed to score a job in the fine arts, which is kind of like the dream for me. I don't know if the dream probably operates in the opposite direction for many parents, but from my perspective, working in the fine arts is kind of the perfect thing for me. Mostly because what I'm really, really interested in, as you said, Jonathan, is doing kind of weird explorations of video games, and it turns out that computer science is not that into that.
I guess like what that sort of contextualizes is that fine arts is an appropriate place to do weird explorations of video games, and that's sort of the conversation that we've been having here is like, how do artists use video games as an artistic medium? I guess one of the uh, it's a big question, but maybe one way that we can look at it is like, how does thinking about the video game medium with as this sort of like a thing that encompasses many different things. How does that different from the art created for commercial games, for example, like the visuals or the music, which some people, I feel like that might be a confusion for some people who might be thinking about this for the first time.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I definitely don't want to pitch myself as a super duper expert on all of these sorts of questions, but it's true that one of the big points that you can get some confusion around when people say art and video games is that there might be an assumption that you mean the people who create the visual aesthetics for any kind of video game, and particularly commercial video games. Which is certainly not to say that commercial video games aren't incredibly beautiful and artistic and aesthetically pleasing in their own way. But I guess if we're making that kind of fine art distinction, then we're starting to talk about, people who are interested in the medium for its own reasons, and then also interested in the medium for expressing, I guess, ideas that aren't necessarily part of the mainstream, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, visual aesthetics is a good sort of way of thinking about it, because visual aesthetics are going to be part of it, even if you're working with video games more experimentally. But there's a sort of more wider aesthetics of interactivity and many other, I guess, like aesthetic facets that go into thinking about video games as a formal, as a medium. So maybe we could start talking about it more by going into some of the examples that you've brought through these slides.
Sure thing. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously easiest for me to just talk about my own stuff.
Please.
Let's get right into it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I can talk about this picture that potentially we can all see. Either I don't have a vision for what somebody watching the stream is seeing. Maybe they're seeing us in front of this image, or they're seeing just the image.
Yes, your head.
They're seeing us in front of the image. My head is
on top.
Perfect. That's where I like my head to be. So the image that we're looking at right now is not from a video game. That may or may not be obvious, given how sophisticated video games are these days at representing visuals. Oh, now I can see my head on top of that image. So this image is of a specific room called, I believe, and I might get some things wrong, it's called UR1. It's by an artist called Gregor Schneider. And please stop me if I end up wanting to talk just endlessly about Gregor Schneider. He's one of my favorite artists. And just to give a sort of a brief story of his art practice, when he was quite young, a teenager, I think even, he inherited this kind of unusable house that was near, I think, a lead mine. So it was sort of like not a great location, not a great house. And he became obsessed with kind of renovating the house in a sense, but not in the kind of standard way. And maybe this is actually kind of an interesting parallel with the whole question of making art, with video games not necessarily meaning the commercial dimension, but meaning the kind of artistic dimension. His renovations of this house were all quite creepy, weird transformations of space in ways that were kind of like art renovation. So classically, he would do things like he would put walls in front of windows, or he would have doors that became inaccessible. He famously had one room that would rotate when you were inside it so that it would face different doors when you chose to leave again. He does all of these kinds of uncanny things with space. And one of my absolute favorite things that he does is he reproduces spaces. So this room UR1, it's a room from that house. It's a specific room. You can see it's just a room it's got a bed and a chest and a cylinder. I don't know what that's actually for. And a door and a light and these sorts of really, really banal, not necessarily spectacular objects, nor trimmings of the room itself. But Gregor Schneider does this thing, and he did this at Venice, where he recreated, I believe, the entire house in meticulous detail, right? So down to scratches on the walls or a blob of paint that's sort of run over the skirting board from the painting of the original house. He recreates all of this stuff in a completely new space. And so that has a video gamey kind of feel to me, or a kind of a computational feel to me, of this idea of duplication and recreation. Of course, in Schneider's case, this is incredibly difficult to do because it involves the actual manual labor of creating this actual space, and carpentry and painting and light fixtures and all of these sorts of things. But I find him so fascinating as an artist because of that intensive labor and that interest that he has in uncanny spaces. Like I said, I could go on about Schneider for a really long time, so I don't know if we should move forwards.
I'll flip the slides, but I like I like where we're coming from, or where you're coming from, in terms of like thinking about the artist building and rebuilding the house as a process of sort of like I don't know, making this thing that has such obvious utility and sort of going against what its obvious utility is. I think what a lot of people who are working in video games very formally, video games have a really specific utility very often, at least in the commercial world, that people who are experimenting with them are often like challenging the way that video games are supposed to work, in the same way that this house is supposed to work, is sort of being deconstructed and torn apart, and then so I like where we're going.
Yeah, for example, with maybe for our audience, a way that just sort of illustrating that, and which it will be illustrated in some of your later work that you're talking about in this PowerPoint, Pippin, is like a video game, and the basis it has a reward system, and usually you can win and feel good about yourself, but not all video games that are sort of exploring what the video game medium is necessarily have what is called a win state. So in the same way of blocking a window with a wall, you have maybe you're unable to actually finish or achieve the win state of the game.
That's very true, and I would say, so in a former life I was a more traditional academic, and I was engaged in the field that is called game studies, and there was a whole movement, especially earlier on in the late 90s and 2000s, to try and define what a game is, and that idea of the win state, or some kind of valorized outcome, was a big part of what most people feel a game is. And I feel like, again, as with Schneider, maybe I'm just kind of lionizing him too much, but I think that there's a great thing that artists often do, is that they take some premise, like, building a house or building a game, and it's not even necessarily that they always react directly against kind of conventional forms, but that maybe they're just not even interested in them, right? And they just they move towards some other thing that they do think is interesting, without almost even noticing that maybe it should be some particular kind of other thing that they were meant to produce. So yeah, I think that that's to me what it means to make art in any medium, and in some way, right, is to figure out what you think is interesting and just go for it, probably without interest in the commercial side of things, and therefore probably without a strongly viable career path as well. That's something else, right?
Yes.
So this image right now, I might as well speak to it. You can probably see, in comparison to the previous image of Schneider's room, UR1, that this is a recreation of that specific room. Not in slavish detail.
But you nailed that cylinder, I gotta say.
Cylinder is strong. That's a strong cylinder game. Yeah, this was all of this modeling was actually done in SketchUp, which I used to use for 3D modeling, because it's actually easy to use, unlike most things.
Yeah.
There could be a whole conversation about whether this should be a slavish re-rendering of Schneider's work, given that that's his process. But what I was interested in, so this game is called VR1 as a tribute to Schneider's UR1. What I was interested in was reproducing this room of his in the same way that he does, but acknowledging that it's easy to kind of reproduce things digitally to some extent, right? Like, and especially the thing that I was most interested in is that if you reproduce Schneider's room once, to make a copy of it is literally, say you're in this game is built in Unity, you could select all of these objects and then hit copy and paste, and you would have the room again, right? So his Venice installation would be done in a heartbeat because you can just copy and paste the thing and put it somewhere else. So what I was interested in were some of those kinds of features of making work in a virtual space. So some things are trivialized, like this idea of duplication. And so that question of like what can be interesting about this room when recreating it is not the interesting thing. And so VR1 is a series of, I forget actually how many, maybe 19 or so variations on the UR1 room, exploring what kinds of things are possible when you're using Unity instead of hammers and saws and so on. Right. So, for example, you can tip the entire room on its side and make everything kind of fall over. So in this case, this version of the room was embedded in the ground. So the doorway opened out into the ground of the area that you start in. And you would walk towards this kind of hole, which is shining light out of it because the light in the room is on. And you would look down and you would see the room has kind of been repositioned in this other orientation. So again, that's really easy, effectively, to do in Unity once you've got some small ability with the software. Like nothing's trivial, right? Like, I mean, Unity is difficult in its own ways, but this is a fairly simple operation. But I feel like it's kind of in keeping with Schneider's pursuit of these uncanny treatments of spaces. Like you can do very uncanny things with spaces virtually because you can almost do anything, right? So that idea of tipping it on its side is one of those sorts of ideas. Likewise, a sort of a more casual kind of looking thing, just like one room leaning on the other room. As I look at it right now, it feels kind of almost like it almost has a sort of affective or emotional valence to it, like that they're friends or they're sleeping on one another or something. But again, it's almost like this a statement of power as well, of the tool and the person wielding the tool, that, you know, I can just take this room and put it here now. And the fact of repetition in this game, so when you play the game, it randomly sorts all of the different versions of the room and you kind of play one after the next in fairly quick succession. The power of that kind of building of repetition and variation is something that's super interesting to me when I explore any kind of video game concept, because I think through variation and repetition, you can really start to identify patterns as a player and as a designer as well.
It also seems like it's getting at one of the sort of fundamental characteristics of, I don't know, digital media, or at least what digital media's affordances are. Is this just like the what is the right word? When it's mutable, like it's there's no. Any one thing has no weight to it, or it doesn't. Like the individual 3D object doesn't matter so much as much as, you know, the code that exists behind it, which can be duplicated infinitely. And this seems like, just like thinking of like the wider art context, it's often artists experimenting with forms. Seems like a goal is to sort of drill down to the fundamental aspects of whatever form they're working in. Yeah, I like thinking about. And then I think that also goes well with the sort of minimalism of these pieces.
I mean, that very much speaks to the kinds of things I'm interested in. I mean, obviously not all art is obsessed with kind of formalisms in these sorts of ways. It's a particular, arguably kind of the modernist position, which is, you know, super outdated and uncool now. But I don't know, I can't let go of it. I just really like conceptual explorations like this in this really formal mode, even if it makes me a dead white man artist or something. zombie artist, I guess, at this point, right?
With every new medium comes like
A new
the
modernism.
yes, yeah, that's great. Put that on a t-shirt.
That's a t-shirt right there. Yeah, that's perfect.
And then on the back, please play my crap, or not crap, but please play my games that aren't exactly so fun to play.
That's nice. That's very nice. And, the image that we see now is like just another one of those permutations, right? That exploration of possible forms. Here, all of the component pieces of the room are just laid out from largest to smallest in a row. So that light point that you see in there is just the ceiling light positioned where it belongs in that order. So the super ultimate formalist vision of the room, I guess. And again, something that's easy to do in Unity. You just pull it apart and stick it where you want it. But looks, I mean, I feel it's obviously it's a shame that we can't easily just kind of walk through this and see the different shapes that get created. But it looks kind of beautiful. Like doing these kinds of experiments, I guess for me, part of it is the totality of the experiments and, having the kind of formalist pleasure of going through all of this stuff. But part of it is about discovery, right? All experimental design is also about finding these moments that are like potentially a powerful or interesting moment that somebody can have with a piece of work. I never seem to revisit these to actually make something worthwhile with these interesting moments. Like hopefully somebody else can take care of that side of the transaction. But I definitely find that through exploration like this, you can kind of hit on things that are genuinely interesting in a broader sense than that they're part of a big set of permutations.
It's also something about because Unity has this sort of interface that is accessible for artists like myself who are not terribly technical. It really allows for a lot of this sort of experimentation, and you can, I mean, just as a having fun thing, it's easy to like sink a lot of time into just seeing what the outcome of different experiments are in Unity. That's a lot easier than if you're experimenting in more physical media.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, just with very little investment, at the very least, it gives you that idea of control over space, and then you can put physics in there, and I mean, that's the world practically. So obviously, yeah, that's super powerful. And this game in particular, I made this before I was at all comfortable doing any programming in Unity. So really, everything that you see is just all about manipulations of objects in space and seeing what's possible there. Oh yeah. And then VR too. So now we're going to get super formalist and maybe slightly annoying.
Excellent. That's what we're here for.
So the story, I mean, I guess I'll tell the kind of backstory of this one. So this one is based on the work, kind of on Schneider again, but also on another artist called Donald Judd, who he's a big deal modernist back in the day. And he famously has this installation in Marfa, Texas, which has since become really interesting for other weird reasons in terms of ultra gentrification. But he has these two artillery sheds that look sort of remotely like the two buildings that we can see on the screen there. And inside these artillery sheds are all of these kind of cubic shapes in aluminium, I would say, being from New Zealand, not from the US, but he called them aluminum. And because he was like maybe the ultimate formalist, each of these kind of cubic spaces were all divided up with these different planes and shapes inside them. And the premise was that he was exploring all of the kind of possible forms that you could get out of this one kind of volume. And in particular, the interaction between those volumes and the light that was coming through the windows. And the light there is really spectacular. And it's a really, really beautiful, minimalist, very formalist kind of a piece. So again, drawing inspiration from a particular artist, but VR2, which this game is, takes that idea in like what I said is perhaps an irritating direction. So you can see that inside the buildings, there's all of these cubes. These are standard Unity cubes, so they're the standard Unity cube size, effectively 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter most of the time when you use Unity. And you can see they're positioned in the building in the same way that Judd's pieces were positioned. And there's no information whatsoever. It's just cubes being displayed. Each one is the same as every other one. Very monotonous. And there's 2 big rooms worth of these. The lighting is still beautiful, because it's, I don't know, one of the things that I like the most about Unity is not so much the lighting system, which can be very difficult to navigate, especially if you're using baked lighting, but just like the whole thing of controlling light and seeing shadows fall is so beautiful to me. I don't know. I'm obsessed with it. I'm still trying to work out how to engage with it in a deeper kind of a way. So the story of these boxes is that they're not all identical. And based actually on the work of Gregor Schneider again, I said I was obsessed. Each of these boxes has got something inside it that you, as a player, when you enter the space, you can't see because they're inside the boxes. And I think the next slide has like the legend of all of the different things, right? So there's a legend outside each building that tells you what is inside each box. And my objective was to include in each box sort of one each of the kinds of things that Unity can produce. So there's things like, obviously there's a model, like there's a model of a horse inside one of them. There's a first-person character controller that would be able to move around inside another one. I think there's a cube inside another one. There's wind inside one. There's a light inside one, et cetera, et cetera. And so the legend tells you what's inside them, but you can never see them. So as a player, you never get to see these things. They are just these 2 spaces with cubes in them, and that's it. I mean, so that's literally it. I found it really interesting just to be playing with this tension about like what's real in a virtual space, right? Like if you can't see something that's just hidden inside of a box, is it there? Was kind of the key question that I was interested in asking. Can you kind of sense its presence in some way? Do you believe me when I tell you that these objects are inside it? I swear that they are, but you've got no real way of checking without kind of looking at the source project of the Unity project. And lots of people didn't believe me when I said that these objects were inside these cubes, which I thought was really interesting. But that's just kind of the bad faith I think a lot of people bring to all forms of contemporary art, right? But this stuff is definitely in there.
Well, yeah, in that context of, I don't know, contemporary art being something that, like you said, people have bad faith towards, a lot of these things would be pretty... I mean, if you presented these things in the concept of in the context of a conceptual art piece, like there is inside this box wind, you can imagine that being in a gallery. Oh, yeah. But in Unity, you can actually, it's these things that are fantastic in reality. You can actually have wind inside your box in Unity.
Yeah, or the sun, or all kinds of things. Yeah, it does have a poetry to it. It's true. Like I didn't necessarily think a lot about that kind of fantastical side of things when I was making it, but I really like that. I like that idea a lot.
Moving. Oh, a trilogy.
More boxes, yeah. So this is the final in the series. Although I've been just recently prodding at Unity again to try and work up the courage to work on another kind of piece like this. So I put all 3 of these in here just because I knew that you were talking about tools and Unity in particular. So this one, I mean, arguably this was the most critically successful of the VR series. So VR3 is a museum of water. And it's 2 buildings again, so it's exactly the same format as the previous game, same kind of idea of cubes filling a space. But now the cubes are traditional kind of museum-style plinths, and each one has a didact, the little text thing attached to it there, and each one has water inside the top of the plinth, as you can see from that image, right? One of the buildings, all of the water is based on the default water that you get with Unity, so it's called Pro Water. It was at the time that I was using it. Which I love that name. It's like professional water. It's a really nice kind of a concept.
They've since and so they've since released it to the masses. Like I
Yeah.
guess you can access it for free now.
A long time ago, like I actually learned about it from a student in a game design class, like several years ago. Like they were working on something very beautiful with this very dark water liquidy substance kind of catching these neon lights, and I asked what it was, and he said it was Pro Water, which is totally free. So that was a pleasant surprise. Yeah. So this building that we see here is all Pro Water, and then in keeping with Judd, who was kind of like the inspiration here, each plinth, and so this one's actually from, maybe we'll go back one slide actually.
Sorry.
And just stay there, no problem at all. Each of these plinths has got just different parameterizations of the same water. So one of the things that you can do with Unity or with any kind of, I guess, programming tool is often change the settings of something so that it looks different or it behaves differently. And so the Unity water has a whole bunch of different properties, such as whether it's reflective, whether it's refractive, whether like how big the ripples are, how fast do the ripples move, is there like what level of distortion is there as you look into the water, what color is the water, etc., etc., etc. And so this space plays with all of those parameter sets, and you can see the Didact there lists all of the specific parameters for the water that you're looking at. So in theory, you could use it as a kind of tasting experience where you can kind of walk around and find a water that looks really attractive to you, and then you can grab those parameters and punch them into Unity and use that water that you have, found that you bonded with.
It's a gallery that like you can take home. It's art that you can take home with yourself.
Yeah, it's free because it's free, right? Yeah, like it's interesting, that it's that accessible in that particular kind of a way. And again, the light is I just find it so gorgeous. I really like it. And of course, it plays with the water, which catches the light and breaks it up into caustics and all of those sorts of things as well. It's lovely.
When I'm sort of trying to show people the exciting artistic possibilities of Unity, it's just, I think you show like rigid bodies, like how you can have gravity so easily, you can have lights that twirl around if you want, and you can have water that is beautiful. And then I feel like from there, from those three elements, you can build so much.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. I mean, it was really, I've always liked the visual aesthetics of games, but I was like working with the Unity water and other waters for quite a long time for this game. I was completely, just repeatedly floored by how lovely they've managed to make this just really technical object be. Like you can really lose yourself in it. So jumping across, I think that's an apt moment to the other building. The other building is paired with that Unity water building by having all of these kind of third-party waters that you can get from the Unity, the Unity Asset Store, right? So there's not just Unity water, there's other people who are making other kinds of water that you might want to use in your game. And so the second gallery is all this kind of water, right? It actually includes a couple of waters lent to me by friends. So this is Robert Yang, who makes amazing games of his own. He made some water he called Decent Water in 2015. And he lent that to me so I could pop it into the game. But then further down in the room, you run into waters from the asset store. Some of them are free, and as you can see from this one here, some of them cost money. So I ended up spending, I can't remember how much I spent. It was over $100 on this project, just buying water from the asset store. And the plinths are arranged from sort of freest to most expensive water in that order. So the furthest water away is the most expensive. I think it cost about $30 or something like that, and was not very good, I must say.
I wonder if there's still a marketplace for water on the Unity Asset Store. I guess there's probably always innovations that you could bring to the Unity water game.
Water genre.
Definitely. The biggest one, of course, is just different visual styles, right? Like if you've got a really low poly game, then sometimes the Unity's default water is a little bit too realistic. And there's a bunch in this museum and on the asset store, a bunch of low poly water that's kind of more crystalline, that just looks a bit more appropriate in those kinds of settings. And again, that's kind of the point of the game, right? Is a lot of the waters look very different to one another, and you get to kind of do this comparison. Like you can either treat it commercially and be like, which one do I want? Or you can just be purely thinking about like, which one do I think is the most beautiful? Which one do I think is the most stupid? Why does this one cost this much money when it's terrible, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
It's sort of presenting all. I guess you could also go to an art gallery and look at impressionist paintings of water versus more sort of like
a modern
naturalist
or cubist interpretation, and someone would be like, "My kid could do that. Why does this cost so many dollars?"
Yeah, so I was thinking
Yves Klein blue. Yeah.
Just flat.
That's an interesting idea for something to put up into the Unity asset store. Just a flat
Absolutely.
blue plane.
Make some money.
I'm excited to talk about this one.
Right, tanks.
Our lightning storm just started here. Speaking of water, we just have to close the window.
That's very exciting.
Yes, we're experiencing heat waves, so it's. Oh, and also just we have a very funny comment from Dallas Flet-Wapash, who's one of our awesome DARE residents, regarding the previous project VR2, just calling it Schrodinger's game object, where you don't know if there's a game object inside or not.
And you could do something more advanced, I guess, with a random number generator at the start of the program that either does or does not position the object in there. Yeah, go all the way.
You might be messing with some quantum forces, though. I don't know if the universe's space-time continuum could take that. But yeah, I'm excited to talk about this. I'm excited to talk about this because we're working with, as part of the Digital Artist in Residence that is just getting started at the Mackenzie. We're working with Unity as sort of our tool to try to like make art with, and really interested to sort of think about some specificities of Unity, as we have been doing so far tonight. But this is the tanks is sort of this like iconic tutorial that you learn Unity from, and I like working with the tutorial as part of an art piece. Sort of goes from the layer of working with maybe like more fundamental formal qualities of the medium of digital technology of video games, and then this has more of a pop art sensibility to it, almost working with the tutorial itself and thinking about the aesthetic products of the medium. Anyway, so let's hear about tanks.
I'm concerned that your intro is deeper than the game potentially.
Thought too much about tanks for sure.
So as you said, this is totally based on this tutorial that Unity put out called Tanks. It's a really, really good tutorial. I would still feel like it's probably the best way to get a real handle on Unity, both as in terms of its kind of spatial layout tools and in terms of some of the basic programming ideas if you're wanting to dip into that stuff as well. And I was teaching another incarnation of my game design course, and decided to force my students to only work with this tutorial for the course, and to make multiple prototypes where they would manipulate this game in different directions, very much premised on the Unity game engine. So there was one where they had to do stuff with lighting, another with audio, and so on. Another one with, I think, with set decoration or something along those lines. And so I obviously thought I should be making projects at the same time, and this was one of them. It's one of those projects where I feel like it was a good idea. So the basic premise of the project is that as you play this game of tanks, which is just like Atari Combat with good graphics, it's just shooting each other with your tank until one of you is dead, and then that's video games. But as you play, there's a random kind of probability thing running that will perform different kinds of transformations on literally anything in the game space live. So it would transform things' position, their scale, their rotation, various other properties that they can have, color, tints, fonts, or like just about any property that you can imagine. It will kind of comb through these and randomly change them for anything that you can see. Looking at this image, I think that this is relatively pure at this point. I'm not seeing anything totally amiss in this image, which is good. That's why I picked that image. But over time, the idea is that, I should have picked a slightly more interim image, potentially. It ends up kind of heading in this direction, right? Where you can kind of see elements of the game still present. That arrow at the top is the aiming arrow, and there are some pieces of a tank somewhere. But the basic experience is that, say, early on, maybe you're playing, but then your tank turns into a palm tree, but otherwise still operates like a tank. I can still shoot, but now it moves around like a palm tree. But then, I know the other tank levitates 1,000 meters into the air, and you can't see it anymore. And then the landscape turns red, and then everything rotates 90 degrees, et cetera, et cetera. You really there's no way of knowing what's going to happen. And so it's really, in the highfalutin idea behind it was that it was the game kind of exploring its own possibility space without concern for entertainment or value, which is why it's not necessarily super fun to play.
And this is a really good example of exploring the video game art medium that is not entirely removed from visual elements. Obviously there's this you're still seeing the representation of the game change, but that the system itself is what you're working with. You're really playing with the objects and within the game and the different situations in combination.
It's like every different part is sort of equal because every different part of the game could be messed with. The visuals are just one part of the sort of just one of the ingredients in the recipe that is the digital artifact, and then they all sort of occupy the same level or have the same degree of fungibility, to use a big dumb word.
It's a nice dumb word. Yeah. Yeah, it obviously has some relationship to that kind of, I forget the precise term or the artist, but was it Metzger, the auto-destructive art stuff, where it was artworks that destroy themselves mechanically from, I guess, back in maybe the 60s, something along those lines. So part of what you end up seeing, of course, is the game completely just loses its mind over the course of about 5 minutes. It becomes unplayable potentially much earlier than that, but visually it becomes less and less. I think there's one more image after this one where it's really, really far gone.
Oh yeah.
I don't know what I'm looking at there. I think it's this camera manipulations have happened in there. Again, you can still see some stuff, but it creates some kind of nice glitch art as it's going. And again, there's the potential, and maybe this is what I kind of liked about it, the potential to find some interesting game design moments by mistake, that you get to, what is this Tanks game like if you're both palm trees, or if the terrain is invisible, or et cetera, et cetera. You get some game design kind of being done for free. It's just, it's kind of like evolution. It's just blind, which makes it slightly less powerful.
Yeah, the goal of it seems like the goal of the game changes from killing the other tanks to achieving these sort of cool glitchy aesthetics that are going to be unique to your playthrough of the game itself.
Yeah, in some ways, I guess I wish that it was a little more controllable in some way by the player, so that it felt more like you had agency in the exploration of this space. But there's so many parameters. I guess I just I never really figured out how I would do that. And I love the random number generators, so that was it.
Cool.
Oh yeah, this was so Independence, Missouri is just a really quick one, just because I liked one really specific thing that I discovered in Unity. This is I don't think it's not the deepest of games. It's a game based on everything I do is in reference to something else. I'm realizing as I speak. It's based on the Oregon Trail, the classic educational game where you kind of attempt to get down the Oregon Trail, and the thing that literally the reason that I made this game is I realized that emissive materials in Unity are super cool. So these are materials, so objects which have got a texture on them which can emit light. And in particular, the exciting thing for me was that they can emit light based on the texture that's attached to them, and therefore that you can put on textures that look like interface elements, and that they will kind of look like little pieces of a video game, like a screen, but you could set them in a darkened space. And then here, I'm trying to read what that says. It's some message. Oh, broken wagon wheel. That's a classic problem that you can get.
Try to
and I guess
repair it.
Try to repair it, and there's a nice broken wagon wheel. It's very literalistic, but I just really, really liked that. And I think there's a couple more slides. There's a color one, which looks, this one. Like, I just really like that luminous quality of somehow embedding the feeling of playing a video game, and especially this one evokes nostalgia for me, and then re-embedding it into a video game again. But it's all premised around that one piece of the technology. That gives you a good idea of how they're casting light as well, right? They glow in a way that I think is really beautiful, just to look at purely.
Yeah, and talking about the lighting system in Unity and how it's sort of pleasing for its attempt at naturalism and sort of casting shadows. What's cool about these emissive textures is how they sort of butt up against the lighting system. And they do behave how screens behave in our world. So like you're saying, it is a cool reference to, I don't know, like the screen you were looking at, the video game you're playing. But I also like how they sort of interrupt how the naturalism of the lighting is working, in that they're not really being affected by the lighting simulation.
Totally, yeah. They're kind of other in a weird way. Yeah, and that's very true.
Great title.
This is just another quick one. One weird thing that happened to me. It's early on in making video games. This is just more Unity. I just sort of plowed every Unity thing I've ever attempted into this. So I ended up working with Marina Abramovich for a period of time. I made this game very early on, back in, I think it was 2011, which was a recreation of her work, The Artist is Present, where she was at the Museum of Modern Art, sitting in a chair, and the audience would go and sit with her and look into her eyes, not speaking, just to gloss that super quickly. And she played the game. It got sort of a certain amount of notoriety back when you could get notoriety for mimicking contemporary art in video games. I think those days are gone. And so she ended up playing with it, and therefore hilariously queuing up to try and sit with her virtual self in a virtual version of this museum, which she failed to do. She told me that she went to make lunch and she lost her place in the queue, which was kind of nice. But I ended up making some work with her because she was interested in video games, and I find her art practice and the kinds of things that she's done in her career very, very fascinating and inspiring. And so I made a bunch of games, but one of the games that I made was these digital versions of her Abramovich method stuff, which are they're kind of almost like exercises that she does to get ready for performances, but she also kind of runs it as a kind of retreat, I guess, for performance artists as well. And they're these kind of she's very into focus and meditation and attention. So she has an exercise called counting the rice and the sesame, which is that you get a scary amount of white rice and a scary amount of black sesame dumped in front of you on a table and all mixed together, and then two bowls, and the exercise is just to sort them into their respective bowls, right? So go and pick up white rice, put it in the white rice bowl, and etc. I mean, the metaphor is maybe troubling as I say it, but that's that exercise. And so I made a video game version of that for her, which was very, very literalistic, and attempted just to try and recreate that idea with some 2D physics stuff. And then later on, I honestly, I'm not 100% sure why, but I wanted to make the post-apocalyptic version of this same thing. So the world has been destroyed, and for some reason you find yourself wherever her retreat is, and you can find the kind of remnants of these exercises that Marina Abramovich used to do. So that table that you can see in the distance there is the overturned rice and sesame table, which has got that and a couple of broken cups next to it. I don't know if I was trying to go back and destroy the thing that I'd done previously, or something as deep as that. That one is the remnants of a building where you would look at colors for an hour at a time. So she would stick a piece of paper that was red on the wall, and you would look at the redness for an hour and I've not been on one of these retreats, so I can't really comment on what kind of experience that is. I can imagine it's pretty intense to do anything like that for that long. But yeah, here we have the destroyed version of the building where you would have done that. It's all very apocalyptic.
It is quite easy to imagine the digital versions of those methods, or what the right word is to call them. I think
exercises, or yeah.
Yes, yeah.
And I also, I think about the performative act that happens with like digital technology when I'm like revisiting a project in software, especially when the software has updated or there's some significant change or there is some sort of aspect of relearning or reworking or revisiting something. I feel like I kind of locate this in this project of yours. Even obviously referencing performance work, but then that's like an aspect of digital work that I think is because digital work seems to have, you don't necessarily see all the detritus of something physical that has been built.
You don't have them sitting around your house. Digital projects sitting around your house, leaning up against your wall, constantly reminding
or under your bed
of their presence.
Yeah, those performative acts aren't they're not embodied in these objects that you have lying around, but they are. You anytime you try to revisit those works or rethink them, or even just see like, oh, does this still run? There is like this very performative act in that I always find interesting as a digital artist.
Absolutely. That's a real cautionary tale about working with Unity, of course, as well, is that it's so famous for too many updates that break absolutely everything that you ever were trying to do. Although now kind of solved with Unity Hub, I guess at least a little bit if you are prepared to have thousands of installs of Unity on your computer.
Right. It's still a pretty shaky foundation to build your whole art practice on, as I have done, as we have all done. Basing your whole art practice on this like sort of proprietary piece of software. Yeah, it's as it like. It's funny to think of what an analogy would be for paint brushes or something like that.
Well, we said it's fine blue.
Yeah. There is Godot now, right? I guess that's becoming a viable alternative.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So the remaining stuff I think is like moves away from Unity and was more. I was just thinking about this whole premise of using the process of making art to kind of think about the platform that you're making the art on. So I've been making a series of chess games. I make 8 at a time because there's 8 squares on a chessboard going along a row or a column. That's how my brain works. And it all really started with the game that's kind of doing its animated GIF thing right now, which is Gravity Chess, which is... I was on Twitter tweeting. I don't know why I was tweeting chess positions, but I was. Not that into chess. I'm a little bit into chess. And I started doing it sideways, I think, just because it made it... I think it just made the characters look a little bit more organized than when they were vertical. And realized that then that kind of had this weird implication, because I was looking at it on a vertical screen, that the pieces would kind of fall down when I moved them. And then wanted to make that version of chess, and spent I think like a couple of years before I managed to actually get around to really, really pursuing it. And so Gravity Chess was born, and then it seemed like it was too thin to just release as its own kind of a thing for whatever reason. And so decided I should make as many variations on chess as I could think of, which is a really it's a big tradition in the chess world. Variations on chess are very, very common and have been developed basically for as long as chess has existed. And contemporary chess is really a variation on the original game that it's based on, et cetera, et cetera. I have a colleague who does the history of chess, so I end up running into a lot of this stuff. So Gravity Chess was one of these, and most of I think what I'm interested in, and why I think chess is such an interesting platform to work with, is that it's kind of semi-universal. Like, most people know something about chess. It's sort of an iconic board game, and it has a very, very simple rule set. that in the case of traditional chess leads to interesting play. But because it's a simple rule set, you can make simple changes to it, but get kind of radically different experiences. And I think this applies to all kinds of game design. I think that there's a lot of really, really interesting traction to be had just by looking at what's already been done and making small adjustments to see how that changes the aesthetics or the emotional experience or the formal experience in this case, or the comedic experience potentially. Just by making these tweaks. So gravity chess is one example of that. I think there's another couple. This one also this is momentum chess. So again, same premise, right? There's this one simple change to the rules of chess, which is that a piece carries on in its direction of movement until it collides with something else. So the pawn moves forwards, but then runs all the way to the end of the board, and then the capturing pawn goes diagonally across the board. So you can play a game of chess like this and have a kind of chessy experience. I think they're all playable. I suspect that if you put a decent chess player in front of most of these variations, you'd find that most of them just aren't that interesting. Like that there'll be a dominant strategy probably that white can pursue so that they always win, because it's just, you break too much of chess for it to stay an interesting game. But if you don't care too much about a game actually being playable and interesting, then you can kind of do whatever you want, right? And that's kind of the beautiful liberty that we have as, engaging with these things as artists instead of as people who are trying to entertain other people in a direct kind of way, is that you get to wander way, way off the path because you don't care what's going to eat you in the woods.
Yeah, I was thinking about this when we're thinking about this idea of utility in the context of like a house, what we're like the piece we were talking about first, the goal of the utility, or I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but the goal of the utility of a game is like a pleasant user experience. If you're trying to create something that accomplishes what like the commercial a useful game commercially is supposed to be, is supposed to be a user experience that fulfills probably just the expectations that a user has, and these are obvious ways that artists, one of the things that is in an artist toolbox, or what artists do, is sort of not having to fulfill that criteria of utility, and in the case of a game, it's you're not, the user experience is the goal of it is not to fulfill your expectations of, for this example, what chess is supposed to be. But it's interesting to think of how chess in this case is sort of similar to Unity, or more specifically to, this reminds me, of course, of the Tanks project, where there is pre-existing rules that can be altered in different ways. Chess is sort of a more, even though there's so many different things that chess can do, it's a more constrained platform than Unity is, but similarly they both have their sort of fundamental rule sets that we can mess with as artists.
Yeah, I think you can think of all kinds of things, like platform is a popular word, but you can think of Unity as the platform that you're working on, or you can think of the design of an existing game as a platform that you can work on top of as well. And it's I don't know. For me, I'm not a very good. Maybe I could say I'm a terrible game designer, right? I'm not good at the main version of what game design is for, which is creating whatever, fun experiences, or engaging experiences, or whatever the correct kind of term is for the commercial version of game design. And that's a huge skill set. And one of the things that I've enjoyed about the chess games is engaging with that a little bit. I think it's easy to kind of veer away from it, or not want to even slightly engage with the idea of trying to make something that's fun or playable. But when you work on top of a pre-existing game that is fun and playable, and chess is sort of undeniably that, you at least get to kind of play with some of those materials as well, rather than starting from scratch. I think that can be quite generative as well.
I think we have one more game.
Last hurrah. Another platform, yeah. So this game, so the game series with the long titles, Let's Play Ancient Greek Punishment UI Edition. So back again in like I think it was 2011 again, or maybe start of 2012, I made a game called Let's Play Ancient Greek Punishment, which was these very literal kind of 8-bit-ish retellings of ancient Greek mythology stuff. The most obvious example is Sisyphus, right? So Sisyphus did some very bad things. He's not a nice man, and was doomed by Zeus to be in Hades, pushing a boulder up a hill, and whenever he would get to the top, the boulder would roll back down, and he'd have to go back down and start all over again. He also tried to escape a couple of times as well. And I was interested in that first project just in this kind of idea of futility as a game mechanic, that you a game that you couldn't win, that had no pretense that you could win, but still presented itself as a game nonetheless that you could play. And since I made that original game, I probably should have included a slide of it for reference, I became really, really obsessed with making formal variations of my own game. So I'm going all the way into my own navel at this point, turning into some kind of a Taurus. And I basically picked different platforms that I could recreate the same game, the same premise of that game in over and over again. I did a bunch of stuff. There's a type.
Oh no.
Typing-based one.
Oh wait, sorry,
was
you dropped
making a version.
You dropped out for 1
I was
second.
I noticed the video freeze. So what I was interested in with this one is working with the super traditional user interface stuff, right? So the stuff that we're so used to that we barely, I guess, even think about what it is, like sliders and buttons and close this dialog box buttons and so forth, and using that to tell these mythological punishments again. So you can see the slider version of Sisyphus here, which was, again, like this was my kind of way into the idea, is that I had this vision of a slider that you drag to the top and then it rolls back down to the bottom. And that is, that's kind of like a really, really beautiful distillation of the Sisyphus myth for contemporary society, or at least like 90s Windows 95 society. And so that made me really want to make that, and then I had to try and make the other versions as well. And as for the Windows 95 thing, it's kind of like a callback to another game I made called It Is As If You Were Doing Work, which I didn't include here, which was a work simulator. And it was during the process of making that game that I started to really feel, for reasons really unknown to me, that Windows 95 aesthetics, or maybe Windows 98, depending on where you land, somehow really capture the feeling of using a user interface in a way that contemporary user interfaces just don't. Just so pure and clunky and like to the point, and not, I mean, I guess at the time they were probably trying to be quite attractive, but they're sort of not now. So they have a kind of naivety that I think is like really helps to drive home that feeling of like, I'm in an office doing this terrible task that will never end. So a fun game that you can't win, that basically just looks like doing a terrible job in the 90s.
Can you try to escape? Can you attempt to escape by clicking the exit window button?
Yeah, it doesn't work. Yeah.
But you could.
Or does it? No. Maybe I think you can have them all running at the same time, is what it is, and you can. I think that's a great question. I don't know the answer to your question. I should know because I made it, but I don't know. You shouldn't be able to close that window.
Yeah. You are the Zeus of this game, so you should have all the answers.
You would think so, yeah.
Calling stuff wizards too is very Windows 95.
Yes, I love wizards so much. Yeah, so Zeno's paradox, I decided to send Zeno to Hades, although he's not obviously part of Greek mythology. He invented that whole thing about how you can't move because, first of all, you have to get somewhere, you have to go halfway, and then you have to go halfway again, and halfway again, and so you never reach your destination. So it's a wizard that has 2 steps, but you have to keep getting halfway towards your goal, and it goes up in these increasingly small increments. And one, like, this is not interesting, but it was interesting to me. One problem with this, if we're talking about platforms, is that you can see there's a floating point number there with the decimal places, 1.5, 1.75, etc. JavaScript has a limit of how precise those numbers can be. So it can't be arbitrarily small in terms of the increments. And so at a certain point in this game, I guess it's a bit of a spoiler, doesn't matter. It reaches that threshold, and then it switches over to a specific mathematical notation that allows you to get much more, even tinier increments using an epsilon thing. It's just maths. But even that runs out of precision as well, because there's a maximum integer that you can represent that would be the kind of, it would take thousands of years to click through the wizard to actually do this. And then it just says things like, oh, you're nearly there, and stuff like that.
I love this project so much.
I think Xeno would accept that as being like, okay, yeah, so it eventually, that, like, you can get, that's as far as you can go to move. That's as close as we get to movement, is the 1,000-year long clicking.
So close. Yeah.
Yeah.
So far away.
I think that takes us through.
Oh, good.
The project
we
that
made
we're
it.
going to talk about. We made it, which is this is a great one, Dan.
We actually did. We got to step 2. And step 2, often we have audience questions in the chat. Today, it's exciting because we are joined by many of our DARE digital artists in residence. So we, whom I'm sure have been cited, been holding back questions till now.
I'll just mention a couple of good other, Schrodinger's game object was that's a hit from the chat, and then Lillian Davis, our colleague and neighbor up
6 feet above us.
Yes, love talking about that. Shouts out the Oregon Trail generation, which I think is really true. It's pretty remarkable, the long ongoing legacy of the Oregon Trail, as being a cultural touch point. I guess part of that probably has to do with its inclusion in school computers, and
it was quite dominant. I think it's a pretty interesting. I think it has some problematic qualities seen through today's lens, but it's a pretty interesting game. Yeah.
Yeah,
and with all its versions next to each other, it's very interesting to see that particular generations of Oregon trails.
Yeah.
Also the generation between millennials and Generation X.
Mm-hmm.
It's Oregon Trail generation.
That's their boundary.
But yeah, if anyone who's on the Discord call now,
hi, Mom. Thanks for watching.
Hi, Heather. Thanks for watching. And then
top fan also.
Sandy Moore, who's participating in our DARE, asks in the chat, great insights talking about updates breaking your game. Do you save a full version with playback hardware for exhibition purposes? It's an awesome question.
Wow, really getting into
it's a really good question. I would now. I actually ran into this problem with VR3, the water game, which was pre Unity Hub. So at some point I upgraded my Unity, and then stupidly clicked, because you're moving fast. I opened the project and clicked the thing that it lets you upgrade your project to the new version of Unity that you're using, and it was not too bad, but it completely broke. I think it broke one water. Was just irreparably ruined, which is that in itself was a pretty interesting experience. But yeah, the thing that sucked is I was doing that for an exhibition. It had been exhibited before in its old version, but they needed a specific controller thing that didn't work with the version that I was using. And so yeah, that water was broken. I actually had to leave a little taped off section in the game where that water would have been, but it had to be omitted from that project, which I like how physical and strangely how it is working at a gallery or something and running into these kinds of very physical problems that are somehow all digital. But yes, now I would definitely always freeze. I would never open a project with anything other than the version of Unity that it was made in, which is fortunately super easy with Unity Hub these days. Even if you don't have it, you can just You can just download the version of Unity that matches the project.
Yeah, that is.
But you're still trusting Unity to keep doing this for us forever, which is very scary.
Thinking of how just if we're like as artists, you're sort of hoping that you're sort of making some sort of an artifact of the the time that you're living in. But just think it's a much bigger conversation for digital art in general of how much the art that we're making will last to be able to be viewed in the future.
Flash, RIP.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, you hope that as more and more people start working digitally, it'll at least be more and more people's problems.
Maybe someone will do something about it then.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just needed to intersect with somebody with a lot of time and money to really get to work on it. I'm sure that we know that there are a lot of initiatives on this kind of preservation stuff, but it's just I've talked to a few of the people who it's their life's work, and it just sounds so hard. It's alarming how difficult it apparently is.
If anyone in the Discord chat with us wants to just unmute and ask a question or drop a comment, that's cool. Feel free to unmute yourself.
Dallas says, "This has been an insightful presentation, eye-opening, woohoo! Sort of trying to find a way to formulate my question."
Questions are hard. I should say, my email address is, I think, all over the internet. I'm very, very happy to talk to people offline as well. Just, you can get in touch.
We have invited you to our Discord too, so if you want.
Oh yeah, I'm in your Discord right now, right?
And for folks who are in the audience and want to join the Discord, please, or you can use this invite code that is right down here, and you'll be alerted to all future Mackenzie live streams and be able to participate in chats with Pippin.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're just...
Pippin, I'm interested in your very quick reference to your game theory test, and and how those theories might try to tackle a game like the ancient Greek punishments, which I actually find quite fun. I've played, I think, every version of them through as they've been released, and I think it sort of connects to me this almost masochistic games are strand where people very difficult games will look for ones that they can't quite beat.
Yeah, I mean, I personally love games like that, right? To me, I think I was talking to you about this earlier, but the game Kaizo Mario really stands out to me as it's the kind of the quintessence of that whole idea of these games that you play almost knowing that you're not going to be able to make it, but you want to kind of engage with that horrible hard edge of hard gameness. I think that I'm not sure. So my game studies background is that my PhD was on games. I did this kind of combo computer science philosophy-ish take on thinking about video game interfaces and the ways that they communicate their values to players. So it was value theory plus interface stuff. But for that, I read a lot of game studies literature as well. And read the kind of the early history of game studies where a lot of this definitional stuff was kind of being argued about, and all these ideas around games as being something that has to have an evaluation. It has to have, if not some kind of winner, then some kind of indication of success or failure, and that it has to have competition and all of these sorts of things, all of which really don't make sense when you're playing a game that's about pushing a boulder up a hill unsuccessfully over and over again. So I feel like one of the things that has really defined my engagement with games has been I mean, one is just to not worry about the definition of games in game studies, because it's probably, it's not the most powerful cabal in the world. One hopes. I guess I might find out now. But also, like, I think that the reason that I use the word game, and this might be true for people involved in all of this stuff here too, is it's kind of a Trojan horse situation. Like, it's one of those words, unlike digital media or interactive art or anything along those lines, that can kind of get an idea to a person and get them willing to engage with it, at least for 5 seconds in today's attention economy. And it allows that idea of play. It brings people in a kind of a specific sort of a mood that they will engage with something kind of strange or unusual. So yeah, rather than engaging with, I guess, formal definitions of game, I've generally tried to kind of take the word, and obviously I end up suffering the criticisms of people on Reddit who say that nothing I make is a game, which is fine. But at least those people on Reddit played it and got angry. So that's something to be proud of as well.
It might be more challenging to get them to engage with something that was sold as new media art.
I'm going to hazard a guess that they would give that a pass. Maybe not.
Dallas was formulating his question, and I posted in the chat.
It is formulated.
He has
formulated.
It's exciting to think about the engine-based context that a game comes from through the thing that presents it, or its gameplay. So he wonders if that can extend to the peripheral sides of things like VR, where the game can't be played without it.
Gosh, yeah, I don't have a lot of experience with more, I guess extreme is the wrong word, but like kind of extra technological kinds of game design or game creation. So I don't think I would know. But it seems to me that, again, for people like us, everything just feels like an opportunity to kind of play around with the form, whatever that form is. If it's a VR headset, then that's what you've got to play with, and that's what you've got to kind of try and see what you can make it do. And if it's just, 2 dice, then that's what you've got. And you can do interesting things there too. I've never worked with VR mostly because it seems like it's so inaccessible to so many people. It's why I've always favored making web games originally in Flash, RIP, and now in JavaScript. It's just that, basically almost everyone, I try and make stuff for mobile now as much as I can as well. I just want people to be able to engage with stuff. But it does cut me off from some really interesting potential technology stuff that would be fun to work on if I could just get around that feeling that it's just excluding too many brains that I would like to reach.
Sorry, go.
Oh, no, I was just going to mention something.
Oh, well, because games, one of the fun things of working with games as an art medium, like we were just saying before, is they have this sort of degree of accessibility, and then it does seem unfortunate that VR is exciting from a sort of wanting to work with it, but then it's like, if people can't experience your stuff, then as artists, what you did have that thing of like, VR, it can be potentially a good art gallery medium, but then post COVID, that seems like for the time being, it's
all those sweaty headsets. Yeah, I guess that's true. It'll come back.
We've got some requests for your favorite, maybe some suggested reads for people.
Oh God.
Who are interested in game studies. If you have any recommendations.
Oh gosh, I might be a terrible person to ask because I haven't read. So one issue is that I have a small child in my life now, so I literally haven't read anything for as long as he's been alive. So that's one thing. But even before that, I think I'd become a little complacent in really engaging with the sort of the more scholarly literature. The one person I would definitely recommend looking into is, and especially in the context of Unity, is Robert Yang, who lent me that water that we saw a while back. His blog, I think it's called Radiator, is, I don't know, he's the best writer about video games in the world. So yeah, I would start with him. Actually, the most recent thing that he wrote, unless he's written something newer than that, which is about a specific game he made about like queerness and masculinity, and this game that he made about men hitting each other over the backs with chairs, and I think it's the best piece of writing I've ever read about a game, which is depressing because I'm trying to write a book right now.
Oh yes, well Pippin himself has written a book. How to
Oh
play
yeah, I
video
wrote a book
games.
a while ago. That is true. Yeah. That's an okay book. You could read that. It's maybe a little out of date now, but I could use the numbers with my publisher.
Dare participants, I will be sharing along a little reading suggested reading list, as well as some scanned PDFs. And Pippin, I'll make sure that you have editing permissions if you have anything you want to throw in there.
Yeah. I'll give that question some more thought. I'd like to offer you more than, I mean, Robert is enough, but I would like to offer you more than just Robert.
And your book.
And my book, secondarily.
Well, thank you. You've offered us so much already tonight, so thank you so much for taking us through this. A couple other people in the chats just mentioning how much they enjoyed and how much they learned too. So
wonderful. That was really fun. Good setup you've got here.
Well, unfortunately my green screen couldn't last. The humidity took out the tape that I used to hold up my green screen.
Oh no.
The setup is
a little bit of the
being defeated by the weather here. But anyway, thanks so much for tuning in, everyone who watched, and thanks so much, Pippin. I'm going to turn off the stream now. So good night, everybody.
Good night.
Okay, turning off the